Okay, so while I'm asking the questions we have so far, everyone else, please feel free to put more in the chat. Okay, Joel, the first one was for you. It was addressed a little bit in the chat, but still want to give you an opportunity to address it if you'd like to. Adrian Wessels asks, thanks for your overview. What key lunar remote sensing imagery is still needed? What's lacking in terms of resolution, spectral bands, etc.?
So first of all, I'd like to thank Amy Fagan for posting a community answer to that in the chat for ClockSat, which I think is great. I can't really address the specifics of that, but I'll ask Sarah Noble. Sarah, do you want to say anything about that, or would you recommend that people read the decadal survey for planetary science and astrobiology and also the ClockSat report?
Yeah, we actually have later this afternoon. Ben Greenhagen will be giving a little overview of the ClockSat report, and Noah is going to talk about Lexo, which is our pre-phase A study for what we might want to do as a follow-up to LRO. So you'll hear some more about what we're thinking about along those lines.
So Kelsey, I'd say let's defer to that.
Great, love it. Okay, so a question for Jamie from Debiendo Sur. How can folks collaborate in Hermes research?
Sure. So we have already selected IDS teams or interdisciplinary science teams about a year ago. So there's already some connection going on there. Of course, just like with any of our missions, these data will be free, publicly available for anyone to exploit for great science achievement there. We will, though we haven't started doing these just yet. I think there's been a lot of conversations around these first three payloads doing some integrated science team meetings. So that may be public opportunity there as well to get integrated and connect with these teams to discuss how to go forward. As well as I think we just got word the other day that for European Space Weather Week in November of this year, there'll be a session specifically on these three payloads and the work they're going to be doing. So I guess keep ears open on more opportunities, and data will be available as soon as we get out there and start making the measurements.
Thanks. Perhaps a related question, not just for Jamie, but for everybody here. Anybody want to say any words on opportunities for international participation and engagement?
I would volunteer that if you read the draft Artemis 3 deployed instruments call, you'll see there's an opportunity there not only for international COIs to contribute to US-led proposals, subject to NASA's no exchange of funds rule. We don't fund outside of the United States. But also for the Artemis 3 deployed instruments, international organizations can propose to have NASA fly scientific instruments to the surface of the moon. They will have to provide those instruments. NASA won't fund them or provide them, but it's part of international cooperation for Artemis.
Yeah, and at least for the gateway payloads as one small example, those are very much intended to be international moving forward.
I'll note that the geology team was also open to international COIs, and we expect that to be the case for future geology teams as well.
Thanks all. Okay, so Kevin, I know there's a BioSentinel talk later in the session, but anything you want to say on the fleet diagram you showed, not including BioSentinel, or any other BioSentinel comments you want to make in advance of the talk?
Yeah, sure. So the reason why we don't have BioSentinel on our BPS chart is because it's actually not a BPS science payload. We weren't involved in it from its inception to its flight. It's really ESDMD's payload, which was originally started through the Advanced Exploration Systems in ESDMD. And so that's the reason why we don't call it out, because we don't want to any misinterpretation that we actually own that payload. However, the scientific data and the hardware data, because this is one of the first ones that are going out beyond into deep space in heliocentric orbit, is extremely important to us, because the hardware that is flying the science BioSentinel is actually what Leia is based on. And so we're really interested in understanding how it survived and how it handled that deep space radiation, as well as the science. So we're really excited. And as Kelsey mentioned, Dr. Sergio Santamaria, who's the project scientist and the PI for that experiment, is going to be giving you guys a talk a little later. Thank you.
Thanks, looking forward to it. Okay, again, folks can feel free to enter additional comments in the chat or questions in the chat. I do have one from earlier today that I wanted to give Joel and Sarah an opportunity to address from, the SMD perspective, if you'd like to, about, there was a question on, will science and engineering EVA equipment be designed for a minimum of crew involvement to save time for exploration? So any comments you want to give on the SMD side of that?
Sarah, you want to take that, and then I'll add if there's any.
Sure. I'm not writing that call, so but I can say I don't write all the calls. I can say though that watching some of these analog activities we've been doing and whatnot, it becomes very clear how precious every minute of EVA time is, and we want to make sure that we reserve as much of that time as we can for astronauts to do things that only astronauts can do and that they really need their brain for. And so the less time they spend, fiddling with deploying instruments, the more time they can spend doing geology. And so I think that is ultimately is our goal.
Yeah, I would add that there's incentives for that in the Artemis deployed instruments calls for those very reasons. And I know that the teams that in NASA that have been refining and developing the tools for the crew members to use for their field geology have been focused also on trying to make those tools very efficient to use. And they've looked at all different ways of how do you bag and tag and keep straight the samples as the crew members are collecting them. How do you make sure you don't need two crew members to do a task that one crew member could do? And I know that they're transferring that information to the companies that for NASA will be partnering on the suits and the tools.
Yeah, great comments, Joel. And Trevor Graff will be giving a talk that in part touches on some of that hardware in the very last session today. So I'd encourage anybody who's interested in this conversation to come to Trevor's talk and ask him questions after he gives it. Okay, so with no more questions, Sarah, there was just one comment on if you can share the link or any information about the geologic mapping LSSW in the chat. As she said, abstracts are due in mid-July, but any information you have on that to share for the group, Sarah?
The link is not live yet, but it will be the same place as all of the other LSSW. So you can just go to the LPI website, and once it's posted, you should be able to find it.
Thanks, Sarah.